Hello everyone and welcome to the TradCast, the podcast that connects traditional archery enthusiasts. Today is episode number 15, and on today's show, I'll be discussing run and gun tree stand tactics with Dan Johnson of the Nine Finger Chronicles. Let's jump right in to today's show. Alright everyone, welcome back to another episode of the TradCast, the podcast that connects traditional archery enthusiasts. Today is episode number 15, and I've got another awesome show in store for you guys today. In just a few moments, I'm going to break over to a recent interview I had with Dan Johnson, the founder of the Nine Finger Chronicles deer hunting blog and the co-host of the Wired to Hunt podcast. Dan is very knowledgeable about deer hunting, and I know that Dan uses the run and gun tree stand setups in his hunting style, and it's helped him be successful, and I thought it'd be a great idea to bring him onto our podcast here today for an interview about run and gun tree stand setups. I think everybody is really going to enjoy this interview, but before we get into that, I do want to give you guys just a couple of quick updates here from upstate New York. Alright, last night we actually got a couple more inches of snow last night into this morning. Although the temperature's up to, well, it's 26 now, but the sun is starting to poke out. And this snow is starting to melt here a little bit. We've still got some snow in the woods, as you can tell here from the from the look out the truck window. But we did lose quite a bit of snow this past week. Yesterday and the day before was very warm, up into the 60s, which felt really, really good. It was our warmest couple of days in what seems like forever. But today we're kind of back to reality here a little bit. We did get some snow last night. Looks like it's going to stop here. So hopefully by next weekend, what snow is here is going to be gone, and I can get out and do some outdoor shooting. And I only have one other really update for you guys. I just wanted to give you a quick little information update. I just picked up a Delta McKenzie Crossbow Discharge target. It's a very small target. It's only like it's only a little square bag target. It's like 1 foot by 1 foot in all dimensions. And I picked that target up at Dick's Sporting Goods yesterday, here locally, and I paid $30 for it. And the reason why I got it is because it's a very small target, and I'm going to use that this spring and this summer when I'm out stump shooting. But I'm going to bring it with me. This way here, if I want to, get myself into specific practice scenarios for my traditional bow hunting, like if I want to practice, having to shoot over a log, or having to shoot through tree branches, or having to shoot around a tree branch. I'm going to be able to take this target, which is going to be very portable, very easy to bring in and out of the woods, and just, bring it into the woods with me when I want to go out shooting, and I can pretty much stage specific scenarios that I want to practice that I might, find myself in when I'm out there bow hunting. So I think it's going to be an awesome target for that. And the target is pretty much, in my mind, it's pretty much, I'm looking at it, whereas if I can hit that target, I'm pretty much going to be lights out on the vitals of a mature deer. So I picked up that target, just a little small orange-colored bag target from Delta McKenzie. It's called the Crossbow Discharge target, if anybody wants to check that out. If you're watching the YouTube feed, I'm going to post a few pictures of it here on this video so you can see it. And I'm going to leave a link to it if I can find it on the internet. I'll leave a link in the show notes so that anybody that wants to see this target can do that. I think it's going to be a great little small portable target, which is going to work great for setting up scenarios in the woods, which will help you practice for traditional bow hunting scenarios. And I've only got one last reminder for everybody. Again, if you'd rather just listen to the podcast in an audio-only version, you can do that on both Podomatic.com and on iTunes. Just search the TradCast on both of those avenues, and we should pop right up. And now, without any further ado, we're going to jump right into the interview I recently had with Dan Johnson of the Nine Finger Chronicles on run and gun tree stand sets. I hope everybody enjoys the interview. Okay, everyone, like I mentioned earlier, tonight we are talking with Dan Johnson, the founder of the Nine Finger Chronicles hunting blog and co-host of the Wired to Hunt podcast. And this evening, we're going to be discussing run and gun tree stand tactics. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I wanted to do a podcast on this topic, and I couldn't think of anybody I'd rather have on the show tonight to discuss this topic than yourself.
I tell you, I'm sure there's guys out there who are better at it than me, but I've learned from some tactics from some of the really good guys at it, and kind of honed my skills myself through trial and error and a lot of failure. So
yeah, I think we all have in various aspects of our hunting career at times. Now, Dan, I wanted to start the show out by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into bow hunting.
Well, I live in Iowa, and my day job, I am a process engineer at a company that builds websites. So that's what I do to make money. And as far as how I got into bow hunting, I was thinking about this the other day, and my very first experience with a bow and arrow was I was out at some guy's house with my mom one time, some old timer. I don't know what we were doing there. And he had a traditional kid's bow. And he took the top of a 5-gallon bucket, the lid, and he would roll it in the grass, and I would try to shoot it and lead it. And that was one of my very first experiences with bow hunting. Now, fast forward several years later, I don't remember if I was reading like a Field and Stream article or I saw a picture of an outdoor life of a guy shooting, pictures of guys shooting a bow. I told my mom I wanted to give it a try, and she kind of just ignored the fact for a while. But we went to a garage sale one day, and there was a bow and some arrows. None of them matched. It was probably the first compound bow ever made, and we bought the arrows. Every arrow was different. Every tip was different. Every broadhead was different, and I can almost still remember drawing back that bow for the first time, and it's just like, just like a squeaky door. And my mom took me out into the middle of the country. I didn't knock on anybody's door. I didn't ask for permission. I just assumed everybody back then let you hunt. I jumped the fence, and I went and sat in a draw for a couple hours. Didn't see any deer, but that right there kind of sparked my interest in bow hunting.
Awesome. I think most people out there would probably have a similar story on how they got started. In fact,
yeah,
I think my first experience was with just a young youth traditional bow myself too.
Yeah, and it was exciting. I liked it. I liked being outdoors. I really didn't have anybody teach me how to bow hunt per se. I just kind of, over the years, like my dad's not a big hunter. My mom's not a big hunter. I do have some uncles who are pretty serious about it, but that was after the fact, and it just kind of snowballed and teaching myself the skills, I guess you'd say.
Awesome. Now, Dan, I know that you are the founder of the Nine Finger Chronicles hunting blog, and I wanted to have you tell our listeners a little bit about the Nine Finger Chronicles.
Well, I lost my right index finger in industrial accident down in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was just trying to come up with a name for the blog, and I figured, okay, I have 9 fingers. Why don't I just bring it right out there and call it the Nine Finger Chronicles? And it just came. I used to be a part of a different hunting community, I guess you could say, previous to last year. And this March is 1 year of the Nine Finger Chronicles. And basically what it is just a story or a journey, tips, tricks, strategies through my hunting experience, through my failures, trying to help others out there gain knowledge that they want to gain, and just a story of my seasons, and I don't know, blood, sweat, and tears, I guess.
Yeah, I follow you, Dan, on social media, and I enjoy what you're doing. And another part of the reason why I wanted to have you on for the show is I think that our listeners could certainly pick up a thing or two by following along to the Nine Finger Chronicles and in what you do out there in Iowa.
Thanks, man. I tell you, it's all about having fun. No matter, everybody has a goal at the beginning of the season to try to get, whether it's a doe or a mature deer or any deer or a target buck. But I think what a lot of people forget is that you have to have fun doing it, or it's really not worth doing. And that's one thing that I try to portray in my writings and my blog.
Yeah, that's great, and that's one thing that I've noticed, from following your blog, is that you certainly put enjoyment as a major priority in your hunting, and it's something that I think most people out there can relate to. Now, Dan, I know you're also the co-host of a very popular outdoor podcast called the Wired to Hunt podcast, and that's another podcast that I follow and really find it to be a great resource for deer hunting information and for all aspects of hunting. And I wanted to have you also tell us and our listeners a little bit about the Wired to Hunt podcast and what you and Mark Kenyon are doing over there.
I tell you what our goal is, and I can't speak for Mark per se, but just through talking with him, our goal is to get people who know more than us on the show and provide as much information about all aspects of deer hunting, the hunt, the preseason, the postseason, everything, to help better educate our hunters, or all hunters out there, hunters in every state. And we also use our own experiences throughout our life and our hunting season to I guess, spread the word and at the same time, try to promote the cause of hunting and do it in a way where there's no bias or there's no there's no sides, I guess you want to say. We want to make it accessible for everybody.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like I told you before, I personally love your guys' podcast, and it's actually part of the reason why I started this podcast series, was pretty much just to get, whatever stories I could get out there to maybe help somebody. And also, like you mentioned, bring on guests, such as yourself and, other people who know more about this than I do, and just see if we can have discussions that might help somebody else out there in their own hunting.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah, and you guys do a great job there on the Wired to Hunt podcast, and I would certainly recommend anybody listening tonight or down the road to certainly check that out. I think they'll really find it to be very enjoyable.
And I tell you what, the best thing about being the co-host is I get to learn firsthand from these so-called experts. The thing about bow hunting or hunting in general is every person does it a little bit different, and every person has their own set of tips or tricks or strategies that they do to, increase the odds of success. And I just love talking about bow hunting and hunting in general, and being the co-host and being able to have experiences like that with some experts, if you want to say that, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's why I'm doing this podcast, and that's why I'm chatting with you tonight. Um, Now, Dan, through following you over at the Nine Finger Chronicles and on the Wired to Hunt podcast, I know that you're a big believer in the run and gun tree stand strategy of hunting. And I wanted to have you explain to our listeners if you could give us a high level look at your strategy when it comes to run and gun hunting.
Gotcha. Well, in order to kind of explain run and gun hunting, I do want to comment first that before the season even starts, I have a majority of my tree stands already trimmed out and hung in popular pinch points or bedding areas or areas with statistically high deer traffic. Now, what I come to find out is every scenario needs to be tweaked a little bit. Or even if I see a buck from a popular stand 200 yards away, that's when I need to start considering a run and gun. And what a run and gun is basically taking my stand down, putting it on my back, going into new territory, and setting it up fresh. And typically what I do is I leave it up. I set up a tree, trim out some lanes, and I'll hunt that night. I'll leave everything in the tree, including my bow at some points, and climb all the way back down, come back the next morning and hunt the same stand. And that's a routine that I've seen work for me in the past as far as getting the evening traffic and getting the morning traffic.
Awesome. Now, just to expand on that a little bit, Dan, in my own research and in reading various articles online and stuff, it seems to be a common thread of a lot of successful hunters out there that a lot of these guys believe in that first time in for the year kind of tactic, and it sounds like your strategy also kind of focuses on that. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, it is. But I'm not making crazy decisions. So if the wind's not right in a particular area, or if I don't have any information like trail camera pictures to back up a reason to go into that area, I'll set up an observation stand away from that area where my wind or my presence won't be felt, but I can see the area through binoculars. I'll set up an observation stand first and see if it's even worth going in. Because although you want to try to increase your kill odds every time you're in the timber, there are some basic scouting missions that one needs to go on to see if it's even worth jumping in deeper to that particular area.
Yeah, that's a great point that you brought there, Dan. Especially when you're targeting those more mature animals, it seems like you just can't get away with as much, and you have to certainly pay much more attention to details for sure.
Right. They don't make a lot of mistakes over their year, and but like you said, the first time in, taking them by surprise and putting yourself in a position where the deer thinks that they have the advantage of the wind is going to be your best opportunity to kill one.
Well said. Now, Dan, could you expand a little bit on that? What you mean exactly by kind of like cheating the wind, or where this deer is going to think that they might have the upper hand but not?
Yeah. Okay. So the way I kind of look at it is, a lot of people when they go hunting, they feel that the wind needs to be blowing directly away from where the deer are coming or going from. So, but as we all know, the deer's best weapon of defense is his nose. So before a deer comes into any area, he comes downwind of that area and scent checks it to see if it's safe. A mature deer will do that. Doe or buck. And there's times where that's out of the picture because of the rut. So what a lot of hunters, including myself, do is we put ourselves in a scenario where the wind will be blowing, kind of quartering towards the deer. So when a deer comes into an area, it'll loop downwind and scent check. Let's say we'll use a bedding area, for example. There's a bedding area. The wind is blowing from the north. So I'm going to want to be on the south side of that bedding area. So all the does, or if there's any does are in there, their scent, or that buck is looking for his bed, is going to be blowing through that bedding area past me down. Now what a deer will do is, depending on where he's coming from, he'll drop downwind to that bedding area, scent check it before he goes into his bed. And that's where you want to be. You want to be on that downwind side where your wind is is just at a right angle to where that deer will feel like he has the advantage when actually you have the advantage. Now, if a deer goes too far in one direction, obviously at some point he's going to cross your scent stream, but you have to know through experience or through trail cameras or through watching other deer movement in that area where the main trail is, or through scouting where that buck bed is, and then set up in a position where right as you might cross your wind, he starts heading up into that bedding area or that food source or that scrape line or wherever he may be going, and sit in that spot and hopefully get a crack at him.
Yeah, that's a great point, and certainly something that that's something that I want to start doing more myself. Because I've kind of fell victim, a lot to the having to have the wind, like you said, directly blowing away from you, and like you mentioned, those big mature deer, buck or doe, they're just simply most of the time not going to come into an area unless they've got the wind in their favor.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And I have failed more times than I've been successful in those scenarios, but it just takes one time and one shooting lane to get a crack at one of these guys.
Very well said. Very well said. Now, Dan, another question I had for you. I wanted to ask you, what are the advantages of run and gun hunting as opposed to sitting in, continuous stationary setups?
Right. So don't get me wrong, I have tree stands that for the most part stay in one spot the entire season. They're in well-traveled pinch points, maybe some bedding areas, or some places where a lot of trails intersect. And I have stands that I leave there all year round because historically I know that that's going to produce an opportunity for a target buck. Now, what I'll see over the years is, for example, I share hunting property with 2 or 3 other hunters who are pretty old school. They have the ladder stands. They hunt in the same exact stands every day, every year. Now, what happens is those deer get used to that area, and they start skirting the edge or looping around to avoid those areas. And that's taught from generation to generation, saying, hey, we stay away from that area because, we've had encounters with hunters before, or a predator, or, whatever the danger is. So, because of that, and even in some of my stands, some of my permanent stands, these deer will, you'll try to pattern a deer movement, and you'll see them come out or go into different areas. So I will take my running gun set, and I'll make a move into that area based on where the wind direction's at, and hopefully get a crack at them.
Great. Now, Dan, just to kind of add another element to what you just said there, actually last year I was listening to an episode of, I believe it was the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck podcast, and they had a guest speaker on it. I can't remember now exactly who it was, but it was one of the deer biologists, and they were doing a research study, and what they had found was that in as little as 12 hours from a tree stand being set up, that deer can locate or understand where that tree stand is, and they'll actually start avoiding a tree stand in as little as 12 hours. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, I truly believe it, because once you put your human scent in an area, and I don't care what kind of scent control products you think you have that work, there's nothing that works 100% of the time. So you go in there, you're spraying down, you're scent free, all that stuff. It may help, but the way that deer's nose works, you're not going to beat it. So, and plus, if you go in there and set up, there's going to be a chance that a buck or deer, whatever deer comes by after dark, and you have no idea whether what's been there or not. So, I believe it.
Yeah, I thought that was a fascinating thing to hear. And I mean, they actually had like several, I think it was like almost 100 deer or more radio collared, and it was a pretty much prominent observation in the study that most of the time these deer were avoiding stand locations in as little as 12 hours, and like permanently avoiding these areas except for like total nocturnal behavior.
Right. And that just kind of emphasizes the fact that the first time into a stand is going to be the best. And I've read other places where they say you have 3 hunts, like a morning, an afternoon in the morning, or afternoon, a morning and afternoon, to try to make whatever run and gun work before the spot could be contaminated too much for a deer to come through again.
Yeah, I think that's something that trips up a lot of hunters every year, including myself.
Yeah.
You just don't realize how keen they are at avoiding humans.
It's like, the way I kind of look at it is, if you ever had that feeling that, man, is somebody in my house, or something's different in my house, like someone got in my drawer or opened a cabinet or something like that. You get this gut feeling. I think that's how they live, is they know something's not right, and they're not going to take chances, so they avoid.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, Dan, I wanted to have you explain to us what exactly your run and gun setup consists of, in terms of your tree stand and whatever gear that you bring with you in order to execute these run and gun stand setups.
Yeah, I try to go as light as possible, but I want to make sure that I have everything I need. And the most important thing for me is a mobile tree stand. So, for example, I have a variety of lone wolf tree stands that basically the hang-on and the sticks, and I put that on my back with my pack full of gear, and with a pole saw, and go in as quiet as possible, set up. And there's times where I'm setting up within 50, 60 yards of a known buck bed. So you got to be as quiet as possible, and try to trim just enough shooting range to get by, and then set up as quiet as possible. I like to film my hunts too, so a camera arm and all that extra stuff. But the necessities obviously are a tree stand, a portable tree stand, whether it's a climber or a hang on with sticks, my bow, a bow rope, and whatever clothing you're going to wear. Really, that's it. I choose to make it difficult and try to film my hunts, but you don't need all that stuff.
Yeah, well said. Now, Dan, are you using the Lone Wolf sticks, or do you have a different brand that you like on that? Or
no, it's I'm all Lone Wolf. I do have some muddy sticks and a muddy tree stand that works just as well, but Lone Wolf just seems to work the way I hunt. So there's tons of other. I believe Gorilla has some sticks. Gorilla tree stands have some sticks and a hang on that could work, but just the way that the lone wolf all packs down, I can put it over top of my pack. I can pack it in tight, and it's low and fast, and then you can get set up. I mean, I've done this so much, I can set up 4 sticks in a stand in, somewhere around 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how many branches I have to trim on the way up.
Wow. Yeah, that's certainly an advantage to be able to, get that stand up and, and get hunting and, like you said, 5-6 minutes,
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Now, Dan, I was going to have you also explain any differences that somebody wants to take into consideration when they're preparing a tree, for this run and gun setup. Rather, it's going to be a stand or a tree that you go to maybe a few times throughout the year, or if it's a tree where you're going in there, the first time you've ever been in there. Is there any differences when it comes to preparing these trees?
I tell you what. Here's one thing that I've learned over however many years I've been bow hunting, and that is the almost right tree is not the right tree. So I've set up in big trees. I've set up in trees where I can, almost that are the size of my leg. I've set up in trees that are crooked. I've set up in trees that are straight, real thick up top, not thick at all. But you have to be in the right spot. And I really don't take any chances setting up in just about the right spot. I try to go to where I feel is the best possible location. And if I have to, if it takes me an hour to set up the tree stand because I have to do a lot of trimming as opposed to, for example, a permanent stand that I'll put in a pinch point, I'll take my time pre-season having all those shooting lanes trimmed out. But when I'm doing a running gun, I want to make sure, you can be in the right spot and have a tree stand there. But if you don't have any shooting lanes, it doesn't matter. So I like to, in a scenario like that where I'm going to have to maybe do some shooting lane preparation and hunt that same night, I will trim as many as I need to get by of where I think these deer are coming from. But at the same time, you don't want to get there, trim a couple shooting lanes, and then the deer tries to flank you or is coming head on at you, and you don't have a shooting lane, even when he's 10, 15 yards away.
Yeah, a good point. Now, just a couple questions that popped into my head here when you were talking about this, Dan. Do you have a preferred pole saw of choice when it comes to trimming these stands out?
No, I mean, any saw will work. There's obviously some that go to 10 feet. There's some that go to 20 feet. Obviously, the higher you can reach, the better. But that's why it's important pre-season to trim as many shooting lanes as possible, and then almost prevent having to do the running gun. But any tree stand, any pole saw will work as long as you can get it in there and be quiet with it. It doesn't really make a difference.
Right. Probably just comes down to your own personal preference and comfort.
Yep.
Okay, great. Now, the second question that I had on that is, now you mentioned about, you're looking to be in that exact right spot, that exact right tree. How are you factoring in, do you have like an equation as far as looking for that balance between, cover that a tree offers in comparison to being in the exact right spot? I guess what I'm saying there is, would you take a tree maybe 10 yards further away because that offers better cover, or are you going to stick to that tree maybe a little less cover because it's in that exact spot?
So what I've kind of observed over the years is a deer really is not going to look up at you unless you're making a lot of movement or he knows something's there. So in a running gun type scenario, I'm noticing that, first off, the way I set my tree stands up is, let's say a buck is if I feel that a buck is going to be coming from the north, I'm actually going to have my tree stand facing the south. So I have the tree between me and where I feel the buck is going to be coming from. That way, I can get away with a little bit more movement because there's the tree between me and where I feel he's going to come from. Then, that's just one thing as far as reducing exposure. But I like to be in the right tree. So if that means limited cover, that's one cheat to get away with it is set up on the backside of the tree. Or, if it's real thick and nasty, get up there, cut what you have to cut, and then muscle in. And if you got to stand, you got to stand. If you can only sit, then you can only sit. So it's one of those things that you have to learn for yourself. When you're going into a virgin sit, you have to be able to read the sign, find the trails, maybe see a buck bed, and know where you saw them or the reason that you're going into this area in the first place.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see where having the tree between you and where you think that deer's going to come in certainly will play to your advantage. A good portion of the time.
Yeah, but if you're sacrificing, it's one of those things where there's going to be times where you're going to have to sacrifice cover to get into the right spot. And, I've been in situations where I've let a deer even walk by me before I take a draw at him, in hopes that I can, his attention is not at me. So, that way I'm dealing with an almost broadside to a quartering away shot.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Well, that would also make a lot of sense too. Now, Dan, I wanted to have you also explain if there's any differences between, when you're on these run and gun setups. Is there any differences between going in the dark where it's difficult to see, as opposed to maybe going in for an early to mid-afternoon sit until dark? I mean, do you have any differences in how you go about getting the tree stand into the tree at dark as opposed to light conditions?
Right. I very rarely run and gun on a morning set. I have to know for almost a fact that I'm going to have an encounter, because what happens is you'll get the tree stand set up, you think you'll have some form of shooting lane come through, and then the deer will come through and there's a twig or branch in your way that you didn't see because it was dark. Or, you'll make some noise. It's just because as a predator, we use our eyes just like any other predator. So it's good to see what you're getting into. And for example, I've been in a run and gun situation before where I've gone in during the daylight, seen the buck already there, and then backed out. Set up again, saw the buck leave in the morning from a different stand. I went back into that area for the afternoon hunt, hoping that buck would come back. Unfortunately, in that particular scenario, the buck did come back. But what I avoided was spooking him, and then he's not coming back once that happened.
Right. Now, Dan, does that tie into, I know earlier you mentioned how you'll, when you're on these running guns, you'll go in the afternoon, get your tree stand set up, then you'll leave your bow, everything in the tree, and you'll come back the following morning. Does that kind of play into your morning strategy, that you've got that tree stand prepared during daylight conditions, but then you are there the following morning to capitalize on that morning sit?
No, I'm hunting that evening too. I'm hunting that evening, and I'm coming back the next morning, most occasions.
Okay. And then you might change mid-afternoon occasionally? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it just depends. It just depends what my trail cameras are telling me, what I'm seeing from the tree, some of the activity. It's very hard to say that I do one thing over another, because every situation or scenario is different, and that's where running and gunning is kind of. I mean, I've been in a tree, didn't feel right, torn down, and moved my tree stand 10 yards to a different tree and set it back up again. and then tear back down after the morning hunt, go hunt somewhere else, come back to that area a different, after having trail camera pictures or seeing the deer from the stand, come back. I remember in 2012, I shot a buck in this bedding area, and it was probably 10 acres. All right, and the area that I was bouncing around in was maybe 10 acres or less. And I bet you I set up maybe 12 different tree stands in those 10 areas, hoping to cross paths with one of my target deer.
Wow.
So every wind direction, every situation is different. And what you have to do is try to get as many pieces of the puzzle as possible and make the best possible guess on where these deer come from, because you and I both know that just when you think that they're going to do something, they'll go and do something completely different.
Yeah, that's true. So Dan, you're essentially letting your scouting and your observations from the stand dictate kind of your next movement, your next plan.
Right, and whether it's just you have. What I am trying to do is to be fluid. I'm trying to base my reaction on what the deer are doing. Now, whether that's going to another ridge, whether that's moving my tree stand 10 yards, whether that's staying out of an area altogether, whether it's, tearing down or setting up, or whether I need to spend more time in a bedding area or a food plot or all these things. Trail cameras have a lot to do with it. But I want to try to be as fluid as possible, so what I'm doing is almost a natural reaction as opposed to a planned and calculated reaction. But in all reality, that's what it is.
Okay, yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. So you're basically, you're reacting to the deer's movement and just trying to put yourself in the correct position to capitalize on what's currently going on.
That's right. Because what rut a lot of people fall into is they shot a deer in this tree stand 10 years ago, and they think it's good. Or every year, deer do different things. And based on what food source is in, whether it's acorns or whether it's an ag field or whether it's, some low browse in the timber, they have a path for each food source. They have a path for each wind direction. So it's like one of those choose your own adventure books. Every time that one of these variables changes in this equation, they're taking a different route, and so their nose is in the best. So they are in the best possible position. And as a hunter, we have to be one step ahead of that. So that's where it gets real difficult.
Yeah, very well said. Now, Dan, I've got one last question for you when it comes to this topic, and that's I wanted to ask you if you have any practice or training techniques that help you with your efficiency when it comes to setting up these run and gun stand sets.
Trial and error. Okay, like I said earlier, I have failed so many times, right? And what makes a hunter better is being able to learn from that mistake. So I've learned that, on the farms that I hunt, I can't go into this area at this time of year, or I need to drop down into this cliff bed and have an access point to a particular area different on a different wind. Hunters learn the hard way, and that's how, once you figure out, it's kind of like an aha moment, or it clicks. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I've been doing this all these years. And that helps you get into the right place a different time. Now, the thing about it is, that's not guaranteed. So what happens is you're going to end up failing again and failing again and failing again. And like I said, it's all about finding the best possible scenario to try to be one step ahead of these animals. And it's hard.
Yeah, to say the least. It's certainly easier said than done. Well, Dan, I mean, I've had you on the line here for about 45 minutes now, and I want to be respectful, to your evening and to your family. So, we'll probably end the show here. But I wanted to, thank you again for taking the time to be a guest on our show here this evening, and I wanted to have you explain for our listeners, anybody that wants to learn more about the Nine Finger Chronicles in the Wired to Hunt podcast, where can they go to find out that information?
Yeah, they can go to wiredtohunt.com, click on the podcast tab. Wired to Hunt's also on Facebook, and you can go to ninefingerchronicles.com. That's my blog, and I also have Twitter, and I have the Nine Finger Chronicles Facebook page as well. And we try to stay up to date on everything that's changing, tips, tricks from the year. But, I just want to tell your listeners one thing, and you're never going to be successful if you sit in the same spot over and over and over again. Now, not everybody has access to a lot of ground, but you are in control of your own destiny. And what that means is you have to be aggressive at certain times and be willing to take that risk of failure in order to, accomplish a specific goal, whether that's, a mature deer or one of your target bucks.
Very well said, and Dan, I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and your experiences with us here tonight.
Yeah, anytime, man. I tell you what, I love talking about bow hunting and hunting in general, and I'm pretty sure I'm just like you, man. I'm obsessed to the point where my wife calls me crazy. So anytime you need me, man, you give me a call.
Okay, I appreciate it, Dan. And for anybody, for all the people listening, I will be leaving links in the show notes here. So anybody that wants to find out more about the Nine Finger Chronicles and the Wired to Hunt podcast, you can find that directly through the show notes for this episode. So, all right, Dan, I'll have to keep in touch with you throughout the year and keep tabs on how your season's going.
Yeah, man. Let me know how you do too. I'm always interested to seeing how other people do it in different states. So.
Okay, it sounds like a deal. Okay, Dan. Well,
take care, man.
Yeah, take care, Dan. It was fun. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. Just a look back at my recent interview I had with Dan Johnson of the Nine Finger Chronicles on run and gun tree stand setups. The last several years, I've come across a pretty common theme among guys and gals who are being consistently successful at mature deer, and one of the overwhelming similarities that these hunters have is the fact that they're being very mobile in their hunting strategies, and that they are oftentimes killing these mature animals the very first time in that tree or in that spot for that given year. And I just want to thank Dan for taking the time out of his busy schedule to answer those questions and to help us all learn more about the run and gun tree stand setup style of hunting. I know I picked up a thing or two from Dan's interview, and I hope everybody out there learned a thing or two as well. I've only got one last reminder for everybody. If you enjoy what we're doing here with the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you could jump on over to iTunes, leave us a quick review. It's a great way for us to not only expand our audience, get the podcast to more people so that we can help more people out, but it's also a great way to help me continue to get excellent guests like Dan Johnson here on the show. And as always, I want to thank everybody who took the time to tune into this week's show. I'm going to see you next weekend right here on an all-new episode of the TradCast.